Marcus Torres wiped the sweat from his forehead and stared out at the endless field of broken metal floating in space. His small salvage ship moved slowly through debris, like a careful scavenger hunting for treasure in a junkyard. The wreckage stretched in all directions as far as his sensors could reach. Most of it was worthless scrap, but Marcus had learned to spot the valuable pieces after years of this work. His scanner beeped softly, and Marcus looked down at the display. Something big was showing up about 2 kilometers away. The energy readings were weak, but they were there. That meant power cores, or maybe advanced technology that still worked after whatever battle had created this graveyard. Marcus adjusted his course and headed toward the signal. The piece of wreckage was huge when he got close to it. It looked like part of a ship, but unlike anything Marcus had ever seen before. The hull was smooth and curved in strange ways that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. Strange symbols covered the surface, and they seemed to glow faintly in the light from his ship. This was definitely alien technology, and that meant it could be worth a fortune back at the station. Marcus pulled on his helmet and checked his suit systems. The air in his ship was fine, but he never took chances when boarding unknown vessels. Too many salvagers had died from toxic atmospheres or failing life support systems. He grabbed his toolkit and his scanner, then cycled through the airlock. The alien ship had been torn open in several places, and Marcus found an entry point that looked stable. His boots made soft clanking sounds on the metal floor as he stepped inside. The corridor was dark except for the beam from his helmet light. Emergency lighting strips along the walls were dead, and the air felt thin even through his suit sensors. Marcus moved carefully through the ship, checking each room as he went. Most were empty or filled with equipment he could not identify. The walls were covered with more of those glowing symbols, and they seemed to pulse in patterns like they were trying to tell him something. His scanner kept picking up the energy readings, but they were getting stronger as he moved deeper into the ship. The corridor opened into a large cargo bay, and Marcus stopped when his light swept across the far wall. Containers and crates were scattered everywhere like someone had been searching through them in a hurry. Blast marks on the walls showed that fighting had happened here. Dark stains on the floor looked like dry blood, but it was a strange purple color that made Marcus feel uneasy. He was about to start checking containers when his light caught something moving in the corner. Marcus froze and reached for the plasma cutter on his belt. Pirates sometimes hid in derelict ships, waiting for salvagers like him. But when he focused his light on the corner, he saw something that made him forget about danger completely. A huge creature lay on the floor near what looked like an escape pod. It was shaped like a wolf, but much larger than any Earth animal Marcus had ever seen. Its fur was silver and seemed to shimmer in the light from his helmet. For legs ended in claws that looked like they could tear through metal. The creature was covered in wounds, and dried blood matted its fur in several places. Marcus approached slowly with his hand still on his weapon. The creature might be dying, but it could still be dangerous if it woke up. As he got closer, he could see that someone had tried to treat its injuries. Crude bandages made from torn fabric were wrapped around its chest and one of its legs. The bandages were soaked with that same purple blood he had seen on the floor. The creature's chest was moving up and down very slowly. Marcus checked his scanner and was amazed to see that it was still alive. Whatever species this was, it was tough enough to survive in the thin atmosphere of the damaged ship. The readings showed that its body temperature was dropping and its breathing was getting weaker. It would not last much longer without help. Marcus stood there looking down at the alien wolf and tried to decide what to do. His job was to salvage valuable technology, not rescue dying aliens. The creature was huge and would take up most of the space in his cargo hold. It might be dangerous when it woke up. It might carry diseases that could kill him. There were 100 reasons to leave it here and continue his salvage run. But Marcus kept thinking about those bandages. Someone had cared enough about this creature to try to save it. Maybe it had friends or family who were looking for it. Maybe it was the last survivor of whatever battle had destroyed this ship. Marcus had always prided himself on being practical, but he could not shake the feeling that walking away would be wrong. He activated his comm system and tried to contact the creature. His universal translator picked up no response, but Marcus could see the alien's ears twitch slightly. It was aware of him even if it could not respond. Marcus made his decision and started back toward his ship to get the medical equipment. The portable medical bay in his salvage ship was basic, but it was designed to handle emergencies. Marcus had used it on himself more than once when accidents happened during salvage operations. He wheeled the whole unit through the corridors of the alien ship and set it up next to the wounded creature. Moving something that weighed as much as the alien wolf was not easy even in the low gravity of the damaged ship. Marcus had to use his cargo handling equipment to lift the creature onto the medical platform. The alien's eyes opened briefly during the move, and Marcus saw intelligence there. The eyes were golden yellow, and they studied him with an expression that seemed almost grateful. The medical scanner had trouble reading alien biology, but it could identify the basic problems. The creature had lost a lot of blood, and several of its organs were damaged. Energy burns covered most of its body, suggesting it had been in some kind of weapon fight. The scanner also detected traces of a sedative in its system, which explained why it was unconscious. Marcus started with the most serious injuries first. The medical unit could synthesize blood plasma that would work for most carbon-based life forms, and he started in 4 drip to replace what the creature had lost. The burns were treated with healing gel that would work on any organic tissue. The broken bones in one leg were set and wrapped in a regeneration field. Working on an alien was strange, but Marcus found that most of the techniques were the same as treating humans. The creature's body wanted to heal itself, and all Marcus had to do was give it the tools and time it needed. As he worked, the alien's breathing became stronger and its color started to improve. By the time Marcus finished the basic treatment, several hours had passed. The alien wolf was stable but still unconscious. Marcus faced another decision about what to do next. He could leave the creature here with enough supplies to last a few days and hope that someone would find it. Or he could take it back to his ship and try to get it to a proper medical facility. The choice was easier this time. Marcus had already invested too much time and effort to give up now. He loaded the alien onto his ship and secured it in the cargo bay with the medical equipment still attached. The creature was too big for the crew quarters, but the cargo bay had good life support, and Marcus could monitor from the bridge. As his ship pulled away from the alien wreckage, Marcus took one last look at the strange vessel. The symbols on its hull were still glowing faintly, and they seemed to pulse in a pattern that looked almost like a heartbeat. Marcus wondered what story the ship could tell about the battle that had happened here, and what had become of the rest of the crew. The alien wolf stirred slightly as they entered hyperspace, and Marcus checked the medical readings. Everything looked stable, and the creature seemed to be fighting its way back to consciousness. Marcus had no idea what he would do when it woke up, or even if it would be friendly. All he knew was that he had found something in that debris field that was more valuable than any technology he could have salvaged. He had found a life worth saving, and that was worth more than all the scrap metal in the galaxy. Marcus sat on the bridge of his ship, watching the medical displays that showed the alien wolf's vital signs. 3 days had passed since he pulled the creature from the wreckage, and its condition was slowly improving. The burns were healing and the broken bones were mending, but it had not woken up yet. Marcus was starting to worry that the damage was worse than his equipment could detect. The ship's computer chimed softly to let him know they were approaching the salvage station where Marcus normally sold his finds. He looked out at the spinning metal structure that served as home base for dozens of independent salvagers like himself. Usually he would be excited to dock and count his profits, but this trip was different. He could not exactly walk into the station with a giant alien wolf and expect people to be calm about it. Marcus changed course and headed for the medical section of the station instead. Dr. Mills ran a small clinic there, and she had helped Marcus before when he got injured on salvage runs. She was also one of the few people who might not ask too many questions about where he had found his patient. Marcus sent her a message asking if she could handle an unusual case, and got back a reply telling him to dock at the emergency bay. The transfer went smoothly, and soon the alien wolf was lying on a proper medical bed in Dr. Mills' clinic. She ran her scanner over the creature and whistled softly at the readings. Her equipment was much better than what Marcus had on his ship, and could tell them more about the alien's condition. The news was mostly good, but there were some surprises. Dr. Mills pulled Marcus aside and showed him the scan results. The creature was definitely male and appeared to be young for his species. His healing rate was much faster than human normal, which explained why he was recovering so quickly from injuries that should have been fatal. But the most interesting discovery was in his brain. The patterns there showed high intelligence and complex thought processes, even while unconscious. The doctor also found something else that made Marcus feel proud of his rescue effort. Traces of a powerful toxin were in the alien system, and it would have killed him within hours if Marcus had not found him. The medical treatment on his ship had neutralized the poison and saved the creature's life. Whatever enemy had done this to him had wanted to make sure he died slowly and painfully. On the fourth day, the alien wolf finally opened his eyes. Marcus was sitting beside the medical bed reading when he heard a soft growling sound. Golden yellow eyes were looking at him with an expression of confusion and wariness. The creature tried to sit up, but was still too weak and fell back onto the bed with a frustrated grunt. Marcus slowly reached for the water container on the side table and offered it to the alien. The creature studied him for a long moment, then carefully took the container with one clawed hand. His movements were precise and controlled despite his weakness. He drank slowly, then handed the container back with what looked like a nod of thanks. Dr. Mills had set up a basic translation system that could handle simple concepts and emotions. Marcus activated it and tried to communicate with the alien. The first attempts were frustrating as the system struggled to interpret the creature's complex vocalizations. But gradually they began to make progress with simple ideas and gestures. The alien pointed to himself and made a sound that the translator interpreted as something like Kale. Marcus pointed to himself and said his name clearly. Kale repeated it with a slight accent that made it sound musical. Over the next few hours, they built up a basic vocabulary of common words and concepts. Kale was clearly intelligent and learned quickly despite his injuries. As Kale grew stronger, he began to show Marcus more about his species and culture. The translator was getting better at handling his language, and soon they could have simple conversations. Marcus learned that Kale's people were called the Vorth, and they were warriors who'd been fighting a long war against an enemy called the Hegemony. Kale's ship had been attacked during a battle, and most of his packmates had been killed. The story that emerged was both tragic and inspiring. Kale had been part of an elite unit that specialized in deep reconnaissance behind enemy lines. They had discovered something important about hegemony plans, but were betrayed before they could report back to their commanders. The attack on their ship had been sudden and brutal, with most of the crew killed before they could even fight back. Kale had fought his way to the cargo bay with 2 other survivors, but they had been overwhelmed by enemy boarders. His packmates had died defending his escape pods, while Kale tried to send a distress signal. He had been wounded and poisoned during the fight, but managed to hide in the debris until the enemy left. Then he had crawled to the corner where Marcus found him and tried to treat his own wounds while waiting to die. Marcus was amazed by the alien's courage and determination. Even facing certain death, Kale had tried to complete his mission and warn his people about the danger they faced. The information he carried was still locked in his memory, but there was no way to get it to the Vorth military from a human salvage station. Kale seemed consumed by guilt over surviving when his packmates had died and failing his duty to his people. But Marcus saw the situation differently. Kale was not a failure, but a survivor who still had a chance to complete his mission. The information he carried could save thousands of lives if they could find a way to get it to the right people. Marcus began to form an idea that would be dangerous for both of them, but might be their only chance to make a difference. Over the following days, Marcus learned more about Vorth technology and military tactics. Kale was fascinated by human engineering and the way Marcus had modified his salvage ship to handle different situations. The Vorth built things to last for centuries, but humans built things to be adapted and changed as needed. Kale had never seen anything like the improvised repairs and modifications that kept Marcus's old ship running. Marcus showed Kale around a salvage station and introduced him to some of the other workers. Most people were curious about the alien, but accepted him quickly when they saw he was peaceful and intelligent. Kale was amazed by the casual way humans from different backgrounds worked together without the rigid hierarchy that governed Vorth society. He spent hours watching mechanics and engineers solve problems through trial and error rather than following ancient protocols. The turning point came when Marcus showed Kale the technical specifications for his ship. The Vorth warrior studied the plans with growing excitement and began pointing out ways the design could be improved. His knowledge of energy systems and defensive technology was far beyond what humans had developed. But he was also impressed by the human approach of making everything modular and upgradable. Kale made a proposal that surprised Marcus. Instead of trying to return to Vor space where he would face questions about his failure and the death of his packmates, Kale wanted to work with Marcus on a special mission. The information he carried about hegemony plans was time-sensitive, but it was not just coordinates and troop movements. He had learned about a new type of weapon the enemy was developing and how they planned to use it against both human and Vorth worlds. The weapon was designed to target the specific genetic markers that made each species unique. It would be deadly to Vorth, but harmless to humans, or vice versa, depending on how it was configured. The hegemony planned to use it to turn the two species against each other by making it look like one side was developing genocide weapons to use against the other. The resulting war would destroy both civilizations and leave the galaxy open for hegemony conquest. Marcus realized that this information could not wait for official channels and diplomatic processes. By the time the human and Vorth governments figured out what was happening, it would be too late. But a small team operating outside normal military structures might be able to disrupt the enemy plans before they could be implemented. It would be dangerous and probably suicidal, but it was better than doing nothing. Kale had been thinking along the same lines and had already begun planning how they could strike at the hegemony research facilities. His military training combined with Marcus's knowledge of salvage operations and improvised technology could create a unique advantage. They would not be bound by the rules and procedures that slowed down regular military units. They could adapt and improvise as the situation changed. Marcus made his decision and agreed to Kale's proposal. They would modify his salvage ship to handle combat operations and begin gathering intelligence on hegemony activities in the region. It would mean giving up his safe life as a salvager, but Marcus had never felt more motivated about anything in his life. He had saved one alien warrior, and now that warrior was offering him a chance to save two entire civilizations. Dr. Mills was not happy about her patients leaving before they were fully recovered, but she could see the determination in both of them. She gave them additional medical supplies and made Marcus promise to check in regularly. As they prepared to depart, she pulled Marcus aside and told him she was proud of what he was doing, even if she thought he was probably insane. The partnership between the human salvager and the Vorth warrior was just beginning, but it had already changed both of their lives. Marcus had found a purpose beyond just collecting scrap metal and making profits. Kale had found a new way to serve his people that did not depend on rigid military hierarchy and ancient traditions. Together they represented something that had never existed before in the galaxy, and their enemies would soon learn to fear what they had become. Marcus and Kale worked together for 2 weeks modifying the salvage ship for their dangerous mission. The cargo bay was converted into a command center with monitoring equipment that could track hegemony communications and ship movements. Kale's knowledge of enemy technology helped him install stealth systems that would make the ship nearly invisible to most scanners. Marcus contributed his expertise in making everything look like normal salvage equipment from the outside. The transformation was remarkable and showed how well human and Vorth approaches could work together. Kale insisted on redundant systems and backup plans for every component, just like Vorth military doctrine required. Marcus focused on making everything adaptable so they could modify their equipment quickly when situations changed. The result was a ship that looked like a piece of junk, but could outfight vessels 3 times its size. Their first target was a hegemony supply depot in an asteroid field near the border between human and Vorth space. Intelligence reports suggested it was being used to stage equipment for the genetic weapon project. The facility was lightly defended because the hegemony wanted to keep it secret, but Kale knew their security procedures and how to exploit weaknesses in their patrol patterns. The approach went smoothly with their stealth systems, keeping them hidden from the depot sensors. Marcus piloted the ship through the asteroid field like he was just another salvager looking for valuable minerals. Kale monitored enemy communications and guided them toward the best infiltration point. They docked with what appeared to be an abandoned mining platform, but was actually a concealed entrance to the main facility. Inside the depot, they found confirmation of their worst fears. The hegemony was mass-producing genetic targeting systems that could be fitted to any type of weapon from individual rifles to orbital bombardment platforms. Worse yet, they had samples of both human and Vorth genetic material, which meant the weapons could be calibrated to kill either species with perfect accuracy. The production schedule showed that full deployment would begin within months. Kale wanted to destroy the entire facility, but Marcus convinced him that gathering intelligence was more important than causing immediate damage. They downloaded everything they could from the depot's computers, including shipping manifests and communication logs. The information revealed a network of similar facilities throughout hegemony space and showed how the enemy planned to deploy their weapons against unsuspecting targets. Their escape was more difficult than the infiltration because security forces had detected some anomalies in the facility systems. Marcus had to use all his piloting skills to navigate through the asteroid field while hegemony fighters pursued them. Kale operated the ship's defensive systems with deadly precision, destroying 2 enemy vessels and damaging a third before they reached the safety of hyperspace. The combination of human unpredictability and Vorth tactical expertise proved devastating against enemies who expected conventional military responses. Back at the salvage station, they analyzed the stolen data and realized the scope of the hegemony threat was even larger than they had imagined. The genetic weapons were just one part of a comprehensive plan to eliminate both human and Vorth civilizations. Other projects included mind control technology that could turn captured soldiers into sleeper agents and nanomachines that could destroy entire ecosystems by targeting specific biological markers. Marcus sent encrypted messages to contacts in human military intelligence, while Kale used hidden communication channels to reach surviving members of his old unit. But the responses they received were disappointing and frustrating. Both governments were too focused on their own immediate problems to take the long-term hegemony threat seriously. Military commanders dismissed their warnings as the fantasies of a rogue salvager and a dishonored warrior who had failed his mission. The lack of official support forced Marcus and Kale to expand their operations independently. They began recruiting other individuals who had reasons to fight the hegemony, but could not work within normal military structures. A human smuggler named Tom, whose family had been killed in a hegemony raid, joined them first. Then came Alex, a former Vorth commando, who had been discharged for questioning orders that would have resulted in civilian casualties. Each new member brought unique skills and perspectives that strengthened their unconventional unit. Tom knew smuggling routes that could get them behind enemy lines without detection. Alex had experience with advanced infiltration techniques and could train the others in Vorth combat methods. Marcus contributed his knowledge of how to acquire and modify equipment using salvaged materials and improvised techniques. Their second major operation targeted a hegemony research station where scientists were developing the mind control technology. The station was heavily defended and located in deep space far from any friendly forces. A conventional military assault would have required a full fleet and would have alerted the enemy to destroy all their research before retreating. But Marcus and Kale had a different approach that relied on deception rather than overwhelming force. They disguised their ship as a hegemony supply vessel using stolen identification codes and false documentation. Marcus had modified the hull to match the energy signature of a genuine enemy transport, while Kale prepared fake orders that would get them docking clearance. The plan required them to act like loyal hegemony personnel until they were inside the station's defenses. The deception worked perfectly, and they docked without raising any alarms. Tom and Alex posed as technicians delivering specialized equipment, while Marcus and Kale pretended to be security inspectors conducting a routine audit. Their false identities held up under casual scrutiny, and they were able to move freely through most of the station. The research laboratories were more heavily secured, but Kale's knowledge of enemy procedures helped them bypass the safeguards. What they found in the laboratories was horrifying beyond their worst expectations. The hegemony scientists were not just developing mind control technology, but were testing it on captured prisoners from both human and Vorth forces. Dozens of soldiers were being held in containment cells, while researchers experimented with different methods of breaking their mental resistance. Some prisoners had been turned into mindless drones, while others were driven insane by the process. Marcus wanted to rescue all the prisoners, but Kale pointed out that they did not have enough space or resources to evacuate everyone. They could save perhaps a dozen individuals, but the rest would have to be left behind. The decision was agonizing, but they chose to focus on gathering intelligence that could prevent thousands of future victims rather than saving the people they could see suffering in front of them. The research data they stole revealed that the mind control project was further advanced than anyone had suspected. The hegemony had already begun infiltrating key government and military positions in both human and Vorth space. Sleeper agents were waiting for activation signals that would turn them into saboteurs and assassins at crucial moments. The genetic weapons and mind control technology were designed to work together in a coordinated campaign that would destroy both civilizations from within. Their escape from the research station was complicated by an unexpected security drill that put the entire facility on high alert. Marcus had improvised new routes through the station, while Kale fought rear guard actions against security forces, who were finally starting to suspect their true identities. Tom and Alex rescued 3 prisoners who were still mentally intact enough to provide useful intelligence about other hegemony operations. The rescued prisoners included a human intelligence officer named Rita, who had been captured during a covert mission to gather information about hegemony military capabilities. She had valuable contacts throughout human space and could help coordinate their efforts with friendly forces who were willing to operate outside official channels. The other survivors were Vorth warriors who brought additional combat expertise and knowledge of enemy tactics. Rita confirmed that both human and Vorth governments had been infiltrated by hegemony agents and that normal military channels could not be trusted. But she also revealed that resistance networks were forming in both civilizations as more people began to understand the true scope of the threat they faced. Small units like theirs were operating throughout the galaxy, gathering intelligence and conducting sabotage operations against enemy facilities. Marcus realized that their little group had become something much larger than he had originally envisioned. They were not just trying to complete one mission or save their own people, but were fighting to preserve the independence of multiple civilizations. The skills and knowledge they had developed through their partnership were being copied by other mixed units that combined human adaptability with alien expertise. Kale had found a new kind of pact that operated by different rules than traditional Vorth military doctrine. Instead of rigid hierarchy and unquestioning obedience, his new packmates valued initiative and creative problem-solving. They learned from each other's mistakes and adapted their tactics based on what worked rather than what ancient traditions demanded. The combination was proving devastatingly effective against enemies who expected predictable responses. Their success had also attracted the attention of hegemony high command, who were beginning to realize that their carefully planned campaign was facing unexpected resistance. Intelligence reports describe mysterious attackers who used unconventional tactics and seemed to have detailed knowledge of hegemony security procedures. Orders were issued to increase security at all facilities and to hunt down the saboteurs who were disrupting their operations. Marcus and Kale knew that their easy victories were coming to an end and that future operations would be much more dangerous. But they had accomplished something that neither human nor Vorth forces had managed alone. They had proven that cooperation between different species could create capabilities that neither possessed individually. Their unconventional approach to warfare was spreading throughout the galaxy and giving hope to people who had thought the hegemony was unstoppable. The partnership that began with one human rescuing one alien had grown into a movement that threatened to derail the carefully planned conquest of 2 civilizations. Marcus the Salvager and Kale the Warrior had become symbols of what was possible when different peoples worked together toward a common goal. The hegemony response to their sabotage operations was swift and brutal. Within weeks of their attack on the research station, enemy forces began hunting down resistance groups throughout the galaxy. Intelligence networks that had taken years to build were exposed and destroyed in coordinated raids. Safe houses were bombed and supply lines were cut as the enemy demonstrated they were willing to use any methods necessary to stop the growing rebellion. Marcus received encrypted messages from other resistance cells reporting devastating losses. Tom's smuggling contacts had gone silent after several were captured and tortured for information. Alex lost touch with his former Vorth military friends when their secret communication channels were compromised. Even Rita's carefully hidden network of human intelligence operatives was being systematically dismantled by enemy agents who seemed to know exactly where to look. The pressure was forcing resistance groups to make desperate choices about their operations. Some went underground completely and stopped all activities rather than risk exposure. Others launched suicidal attacks against hegemony targets, hoping to cause maximum damage before they were inevitably captured or killed. Marcus and Kale realized that the scattered resistance movement needed better coordination and a new strategy if they were going to survive the enemy counteroffensive. Their analysis of capture hegemony communications revealed that the enemy was using a sophisticated tracking system to monitor resistance activities. Advanced sensors could detect the energy signatures of modified weapons and equipment that most rebel groups relied on. Communication intercepts allowed them to predict where attacks would happen and prepare appropriate countermeasures. The traditional approaches to guerrilla warfare were failing against an enemy with superior technology and unlimited resources. Kale proposed a radical change in their tactics that drew on both human and Vorth military traditions. Instead of trying to hide from enemy surveillance, they would make themselves too numerous and unpredictable to track effectively. Small teams operating independently would create so many targets that the hegemony could not monitor them all simultaneously. The key was to make every team capable of adapting its methods based on local conditions rather than following centralized orders. Marcus saw the genius in this approach and began developing the technical systems needed to support it. He created standardized equipment packages that could be assembled from common salvage materials found on any world. Communication protocols were designed to work through civilian networks without revealing their true purpose. Training materials were disguised as technical manuals for obsolete machinery that nobody would bother to examine closely. The transformation of their resistance cell into a training and coordination center required them to recruit people with very different skills than their original combat team. They needed teachers who could pass on technical knowledge to new recruits. They needed organizers who could establish cells on different worlds without arousing suspicion. Most importantly, they needed people who could think like the enemy and anticipate how the hegemony would respond to changing tactics. Their first major recruitment success was a former hegemony engineer named Davis who had become disgusted with his government's methods and defected to human space. His knowledge of enemy technology was invaluable for developing countermeasures, and he could teach others how to recognize and exploit weaknesses in hegemony equipment. Davis also brought contacts within the enemy military who could provide intelligence about upcoming operations. The second key recruit was a Vorth strategist named Nira, who specialized in unconventional warfare theory. She had been developing new tactical doctrines for the Vorth military when the war began, but her ideas were considered too radical for implementation. Her analysis of successful resistance movements throughout galactic history provided the theoretical framework for their expanded operations. Nira could train team leaders to think strategically while maintaining the flexibility needed for guerrilla operations. With their new leadership team in place, Marcus and Kale began establishing training camps on remote worlds where new recruits could learn the skills they needed to fight effectively. The camps were disguised as mining operations or agricultural settlements that would not attract enemy attention. Trainees learned to build weapons and equipment from scrap materials while studying enemy tactics and weaknesses through carefully designed scenarios. The training program emphasized adaptation and improvisation over rigid adherence to standard procedures. Human instructors taught alien recruits to think creatively about problem solving, while Vorth trainers showed humans how to coordinate their efforts for maximum effectiveness. The mixed training teams created a unique military culture that combined the best aspects of multiple species, while avoiding the limitations that held back conventional forces. Their first major test came when hegemony launched a massive offensive against both human and Vorth border worlds. The enemy deployed their new genetic weapons for the first time in actual combat, and the results were devastating. Entire planetary defense forces were wiped out when their own equipment was turned against them. Civilian populations fled in panic as weapons designed to protect them became instruments of genocide. Marcus and Kale coordinated the resistance response from their hidden command center, while newly trained cells struck at enemy supply lines and communication networks. The attacks were small-scale compared to the main battle, but they had cumulative effects that the enemy had not anticipated. Hegemony forces found their logistics disrupted and their intelligence networks compromised at crucial moments during the offensive. The resistance tactics proved especially effective against the genetic weapons because they relied on captured or improvised equipment rather than standard military hardware. When the enemy tried to turn human weapons against their users, they found that resistance fighters were using Vorth technology modified with human components. When they targeted Vorth equipment, they discovered it had been rebuilt using techniques from a dozen different species that made it impossible to predict how it would respond. More importantly, the mixed composition of resistance teams meant that the genetic weapons could not eliminate entire units with a single activation. Human fighters could continue operating when Vor-specific weapons were deployed, while alien team members took over when human targeting systems were activated. The enemy found themselves facing opponents who could adapt to their most advanced weapons faster than new countermeasures could be developed. The success of their resistance operations attracted the attention of regular military commanders on both sides who had previously dismissed them as amateurs playing at war. Human and Vor generals began requesting coordination with resistance cells operating in their sectors. Intelligence services started sharing information that had previously been classified too highly for civilian access. The recognition was gratifying, but also brought new dangers and responsibilities. Official military cooperation meant that resistance operations had to be coordinated with larger strategic objectives rather than just disrupting enemy activities wherever opportunities arose. Marcus found himself attending planning sessions with admirals and generals who wanted to use his people for missions that conventional forces could not accomplish. The integration was necessary for winning the war, but it threatened to destroy the flexibility and independence that made the resistance effective. Kale struggled with similar problems as Vorth High Command tried to incorporate his tactics into their traditional military doctrine. Ancient protocols and chains of command were poorly suited to the rapid decision-making and constant adaptation that resistance operations required. Military leaders who had spent decades following established procedures found it difficult to trust subordinates to make critical decisions without detailed orders and oversight. The solution came from an unexpected source when Davis received a communication from his former colleagues still working within the hegemony military structure. A group of enemy officers had become convinced that their government's methods were leading toward the destruction of galactic civilization. They were willing to provide intelligence and even direct assistance to resistance forces if it would help bring the war to a faster conclusion. The defection of key hegemony personnel created opportunities that Marcus and Kale had never imagined possible. Enemy officers provided detailed information about planned operations while technicians sabotaged critical systems at precisely the right moments. Supply officers diverted shipments of advanced weapons to resistance cells while intelligence analysts fed false information to their own command structure. But the internal resistance within hegemony forces also created new dangers for Marcus and his team. Enemy security services became paranoid about infiltration and began conducting loyalty investigations that threatened to expose their allies. Double agents and false defectors were used to identify resistance sympathizers who were then eliminated in carefully staged accidents. The intelligence war became as important as the shooting war and much more complicated to manage. The climax of their expanded operations came when intelligence sources revealed that the hegemony was preparing to deploy a massive genetic weapon capable of sterilizing entire star systems. The device would target the basic biological processes that all carbon-based life depended on and would make affected worlds uninhabitable for thousands of years. It was the ultimate genocide weapon designed to end the war by eliminating everyone who opposed hegemony rule. Marcus and Kale realized that stopping this weapon would require their largest and most dangerous operation yet. Every resistance cell in the galaxy would need to coordinate their efforts to strike at the facility where the weapon was being assembled. The attack would have to succeed completely because there would be no opportunity for a second attempt. Failure would mean the end of both human and Vor civilizations and the beginning of a dark age that could last for millennia. Preparation for the final mission required them to reveal the full extent of their network and coordinate with regular military forces in ways they had never attempted before. The resistance movement that had begun with one human rescuing one alien had grown into a galaxy-spanning organization capable of challenging the most powerful military force in known space. But everything they had built would be meaningless if they could not stop the ultimate weapon before it was deployed against innocent worlds. The final battle began in the same debris field where Marcus had first found Kale nearly 2 years earlier. Intelligence reports confirmed that the hegemony had chosen this location to assemble their ultimate weapon because they believed the wreckage would provide cover for their operations, while the remote location would prevent interference from enemy forces. They had not anticipated that the resistance movement would see this choice as symbolic and worth any sacrifice to stop. Marcus piloted his modified salvage ship through the familiar maze of broken metal, while Kale coordinated communications with resistance cells converging from across the galaxy. Hundreds of small vessels disguised as traders and salvagers were approaching the target area using routes that would not attract attention from hegemony patrols. Each ship carried a mixed crew of humans and aliens trained in the unconventional tactics that had proven so effective throughout the war. The enemy facility was massive and heavily defended with orbital platforms and patrol fleets that could destroy any conventional assault force. But the Resistance had learned to think differently about such problems, and their solution relied on coordination rather than overwhelming firepower. Teams would strike simultaneously at multiple targets using the element of surprise to achieve objectives that no single unit could accomplish alone. Tom led the first wave of attacks against the outer sensor networks that provided early warning of approaching threats. His smuggling experience allowed him to guide small, fast ships through the detection grids, while specialized teams used Davis's knowledge of hegemony technology to plant virus programs in the monitoring systems. Within minutes, the enemy commanders found themselves blind activities in large sections of the debris field. Alex coordinated infiltration teams that used Vor's stealth techniques combined with human adaptability to penetrate the facility's outer defenses. The mixed composition of these units allowed them to exploit weaknesses that neither species could have targeted alone. Human flexibility helped them adapt when security measures were different than expected, while Vor's tactical discipline kept them focused on their objectives under extreme pressure. Rita managed an intelligence operation that fed false information to enemy commanders while gathering real-time data about the facility's defenses and the weapon's assembly status. Her network of contacts provided crucial updates about hegemony reinforcements and helped coordinate the timing of different assault phases. The information war was as important as the physical battle because it determined whether the Resistance could maintain the element of surprise long enough to complete their mission. Nera commanded the diversionary attacks that drew enemy attention away from the main assault targets. Her strategic analysis had identified weaknesses in hegemony doctrine that could be exploited through coordinated feints and false retreats. The enemy responded predictably to what appeared to be conventional attacks, while missing the real threats approaching from unexpected directions. The weapon itself was housed in a converted asteroid that had been hollowed out and filled with the most advanced technology the hegemony could produce. Marcus and Kale led the assault team that would penetrate the facility and destroy the device before it could be activated. Their partnership had evolved over months of combat into an almost telepathic understanding of each other's capabilities and intentions. Fighting their way through the facility required every skill they had learned during their time together. Marcus's mechanical knowledge helped them bypass security systems and navigate through areas where the original asteroid structure had been modified. Kale's combat experience kept them alive when they encountered enemy defenders who were willing to die rather than allow the weapon to be threatened. The Resistance fighters they encountered throughout the facility showed how far their movement had evolved from its humble beginnings. Teams of humans and aliens worked together seamlessly using tactics that combined the best elements of multiple military traditions. Young fighters who had learned their skills in Resistance training camps fought alongside veterans who had survived the early desperate days when capture meant certain death. But the enemy was also learning and adapting to Resistance tactics. Hegemony forces had developed new weapons specifically designed to counter mixed species teams. Automated defense systems could rapidly switch between different targeting modes to neutralize whatever combination of opponents they faced. Security protocols had been revised to account for the unpredictable methods that Resistance fighters employed. The battle for the weapon facility became a race between destruction and completion as both sides realized that time was running out. Enemy technicians worked frantically to finish the device while Resistance fighters fought to reach them before the final calibrations could be completed. Every minute that passed brought the galaxy closer to an unprecedented catastrophe that would reshape the balance of power for generations. Marcus reached the weapon control center first and began the complex process of shutting down systems that he barely understood. The hegemony had built safeguards into every component to prevent exactly this kind of sabotage, but his experience with improvised repairs helped him find workarounds that the original designers had never considered. Kale provided security, while Marcus worked with hegemony defectors who guided him through the most critical procedures. The shutdown process was complicated by the arrival of enemy reinforcements who were determined to prevent the weapon's destruction even if it meant sacrificing the entire facility. Heavy combat erupted throughout the asteroid as Resistance fighters found themselves outnumbered and outgunned by elite hegemony troops, equipped with the most advanced equipment their military could provide. Davis proved crucial during this phase as his knowledge of enemy tactics allowed the Resistance to anticipate and counter moves that would have devastated conventional forces. The defected engineer had become one of their most valuable assets, and his guidance helped small teams achieve objectives that should have required much larger units. His inside knowledge of hegemony psychology also helped predict how enemy commanders would respond to changing battlefield conditions. The final moments of the battle came down to a choice between completing the weapon's shutdown and escaping before the facility's self-destruct systems activated. Marcus realized that they could save the galaxy, but probably not themselves as enemy forces closed in on their position. The decision was easier than he had expected because everything they had worked for depended on stopping the weapon regardless of personal cost. Kale made the same choice without hesitation and continued fighting to buy Marcus the time needed to complete the shutdown sequence. The Vorth warrior had found redemption for his earlier failure and a new definition of honor that transcended the rigid traditions of his people. His sacrifice would ensure that countless worlds would never experience the horror that the genetic weapon could have unleashed. But the Resistance movement had become larger than any individual, and other teams were already moving to extract the core assault group before the facility exploded. Tom used his piloting skills to navigate through the collapsing structure, while Alex led fighting retreats that kept enemy forces from interfering with the evacuation. Rita coordinated rescue efforts while maintaining communication with Resistance cells throughout the galaxy. The destruction of the ultimate weapon marked a turning point in the war, but not its end. The hegemony still controlled vast territories and possessed formidable military forces that would continue fighting for years to come. But they had lost their chance for a quick, decisive victory and now faced a galaxy-wide Resistance movement that had proven it could adapt to any challenge. More importantly, the partnership between species that Marcus and Kale had pioneered was spreading throughout the galaxy as people realized that cooperation produced capabilities that no single civilization could achieve alone. Human adaptability combined with alien knowledge created solutions to problems that had seemed impossible. The rigid barriers between species were breaking down as practical necessity forced different peoples to work together for survival. Marcus survived the final battle, but was seriously injured during the escape from the weapon facility. Kale carried him to safety and stayed with him during the long recovery process that followed. Their friendship had become a symbol of what was possible when individuals from different backgrounds chose to trust each other despite cultural differences and ancient prejudices. The war continued for 3 more years, but the character of the conflict had changed fundamentally. Instead of separate human and Vorth forces fighting independently against a common enemy, the galaxy now saw integrated units that drew strength from diversity rather than uniformity. The hegemony found itself facing opponents who could not be predicted or countered using conventional military analysis. When peace finally came, it was negotiated by diplomatic teams that included representatives from dozens of species working together toward common goals. The Resistance movement that had begun with military necessity evolved into a permanent alliance that transformed galactic civilization. Trade networks expanded as different worlds shared knowledge and resources that had previously been hoarded for competitive advantage. Marcus returned to salvage work, but his operations now included crews from multiple species who brought different perspectives to the challenges of space recovery. His ship became a traveling school where young people from various worlds learned the practical skills needed to maintain the complex technology that kept galactic civilization functioning. The improvisational methods that had proven so effective during the war found peaceful applications in civilian industries. Kale established a new military academy that taught integrated tactics to officer candidates from allied species. His curriculum emphasized flexibility and adaptation over rigid adherence to doctrine while maintaining the discipline and coordination needed for effective operations. The hybrid approach to warfare that had defeated the hegemony became the standard for peacekeeping forces throughout the galaxy. The partnership between the human mechanic and the alien warrior had lasted only a few years, but its effects would influence galactic civilization for centuries to come. They had proven that the future belonged not to any single species, but to those willing to build bridges across the differences that divided them. The unity forged in the Crucible War became the foundation for a golden age of cooperation and exploration that exceeded the dreams of both their peoples.